Hey everybody, episode 4. Again, I didn't get very far. We have some things we had to accomplish, trying to get that first couple weeks activities over. So anyway, hi. So we left off here. I'm going to reiterate, you have to know that the 19th century absolutely positively equals railroads, railroads, railroads. We talked about 1807, first steamboat, 1819, first steamship, and then the rocket in 1829, 15 miles per hour. Before long, from 1840s to 1860s, all across the earth, railroads everywhere. 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad in Promontory Point, Utah. So you have to know that the big railroad tycoons, the captains of industry, on the east was Vanderbilt, on the west was Stanford, as well as others, but those are the biggest. They got money, subsidies, government subsidies to build their railroads, and they got free land. So they did not do it all on their own. They did not accomplish all of that on their own, and yet they still got exceedingly rich and had no regulations because of laissez-faire economics, which means leave it alone. No regulations of any kind. Okay, you have to know that land speculators gambled on where the railroad might be built. They would buy that land and hope that they would put the railroad through there, and then their profits would be huge when people came to buy the land around the railroads. Railroads opened new markets and gave land value as cities grew along the railroad. If you had, wherever the railroads went, those towns and cities became huge, and other places that were 10, 15, 20, 30 miles off of the railroads started to become ghost towns, and people moved to the big cities that were on the railroads so they could ship stuff out, so they could ship stuff in, and transportation, like everybody used the railroads. It was huge, a huge change in technology. For the past 10,000 years, nothing like it. It was huge. Can't overestimate that. Okay, the West was opened by railroads. Western farmers could send goods back east, but they were at the mercy of the unscrupulous railroad industry who jacked up prices ridiculously high. They could charge anything they want because of laissez-faire economics, and they did. The Great Pacific Railway commenced. Immigration will soon pour into these valleys. 10 millions of immigrants will settle in this golden land in 20 years. So like in the north, Scandinavians settle in the north, where I'm from in Ohio. There's a lot of Germans. Some of you know that the Boston Celtics, that Boston is mostly Irish, because when people came here, when they immigrated here, emigrated from their country, emigrated with an E, from their country, but when they immigrated into our countries, of course, they went where they felt comfortable. So Jewish people went to New York City and became part of the Jewish community in New York City, Long Island, places like that. And then Scandinavia, all the northerners, the people that live in Minnesota and North Dakota and Wisconsin, a lot of those people were from Scandinavia. So people went to where they felt comfortable, around people that felt comfortable with. And these are the transcontinental railroads. When the South seceded, the North could then build the transcontinental railroad wherever it wanted. Clearly, from 1861 to 1865, nobody was out there building railroads and being like, hold on, don't shoot, I'm just building a railroad, don't shoot me. Nobody did that. Nobody did that. They had to wait till that war was over. So quickly thereafter, 4 years later, 1869, we have the Transcontinental Railroad, and then 5 others shortly thereafter. Congress passed the Pacific Railway Act, paying the Union Pacific Railroad to begin westward from Omaha. Irish. In the east, going west, were Irish immigrants, freedmen, but a lot of Irish. And then the opposite, from the west going east, many, many Chinese laborers. By the way, Pulitzer was the first person to use dynamite to blow things up, especially the Rocky Mountains, where they had to try to go make tunnels through the mountains and go through them. And Chinese laborers were the ones that were most capable of doing that without blowing themselves up. So they were very well known for being the people that used the dynamite to blow up their path through the Rocky Mountains. So the Chinese laborers were in the West. They were horribly scorned. People were terrible to them. 1869, there it is, Promontory Point, Utah. This is the famous picture of the very first time that we had the golden spike with a silver maul, which is a hammer, in 1869, and we now have a transcontinental railroad. Oh, that's a cool picture. This is a coin that they made to mark that date. And then 5 transcontinental railroads. I thought it was within 10 years. It's actually within about 30 years. There were then 5 transcontinental railroads in the country. There they are. Okay, by 1900. So again, the captains of industry, Vanderbilt, especially Stanford, they built these huge railroads. I consider them robber barons because they hurt the working people. A lot of people died building railroads. They were treated unjustly. They were paid very poor wages, didn't have a lot to eat, just treated horribly. And then the robber barons, captains of industry, made millions and millions and millions of dollars. Some of the richest people of the 19th century were in railroads. And so that came with the help of the government. You have to know that. They have laissez-faire for them, that there's no regulation, and yet they got government money, they got government land. So you should know that part about that. Okay, this is a famous picture of manifest destiny. So I have it over here on the board. I put manifest on the board behind me. Manifest means obvious. It literally stands for obvious. So our obvious destiny, John O'Sullivan wrote in a newspaper or a journal of some sort about our obvious destiny to go basically from sea to shining sea, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and to have all of the lands in between. I feel like that was like 1845, and then we had the Mexican-American War and took a lot of land from them. And we did it. We accomplished manifest destiny. This picture, if you ever see this picture, your brain should immediately go, oh, that's manifest destiny. Because it's showing us trains. And this is telegraph wire. So some of you know, Samuel Morse invented the Morse code. And that's why we have the telegraph. And we have, for the first time, instant communication across the country. SOS is like ... Manifest destiny. It's our obvious destiny, and indeed, we completed it. At the expense of the Native Americans, remember. At the horrible expense of the Native Americans. Don't forget about the Dawes Act, 1887, and assimilation and reservations and making people be farmers. All right, this is another famous place. This is the Pullman. Pullman made these cars. Sorry, I got something on my screen. Make it go away. Pullman made these cars. Sorry, it's still there again. Pullman Palace cars. Think Jay-Z and Beyonce in a private jet. Donald Trump, they have these private jets, and they're beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. This wouldn't even be it, because this would just be a car for the rich people, not like Carnegie or Rockefeller, because Carnegie and Rockefeller would have a whole car that looked more like a living room and have like a dining room table and chairs to eat around and a couch, a recliner chair, something like that. So the whole car would be specifically theirs, just like Beyonce and Jay-Z would have a private jet that belongs entirely to them. So this was made by George Pullman in Illinois. He is also a captain of industry, made a lot of money making railroad cars, because clearly there's railroads all over the country now, and you need a lot of trains to be able to put on those tracks. And so he built a lot of these railroad cars, and he's very famous for the Pullman Palace cars. Okay, Gustavus Swift of Swift and Armour, meatpacking in Chicago, developed refrigerated train cars to transport meat and perishable items. This is a refrigerated train car. The very, very first time that we used refrigeration on a grand scale was because people shipped their animals, their livestock, to the shipyards, the cutting fields, the meatpacking industries near Chicago. Think Green Bay Packers, the football team. They're called the Packers because they are meatpacking, just like in Chicago. Swift and Armour are also captains of industry in the meatpacking industry. Mostly around that region. A lot of you know I'm looking at a map over there. A lot of people around that region, Green Bay, Chicago, that whole region, that's because we would get livestock from the west to Chicago, and then after it became produced and made into meat, then we would ship it to the east or to the south or back out to people in the west. I was telling everybody about the assembly line for the meatpacking industry. It was vicious and brutal and terrible. A cow would be shuttled in, and you would have a shackle would be put around the cow's leg, and that would be ripped up into the sky off a hook, and an assembly line started, and it would be hanging upside down, screeching. Somebody would have to cut its throat, somebody would slit its belly, somebody else had to take the guts out. So It was a very brutal process, but I mean, we still have that today. We still eat meat today. And as a result of that, that same thing happens. We just now euthanize animals before we start to cut them open. They didn't actually used to do that before. It's still a really gruesome thing. We're going to talk about meat packing again when we get to Teddy Roosevelt as well. So Swift and Armour. Okay, railroads stitched the nation together. You have to know, 19th century equals railroads, 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 railroads. They made this like a one unified nation. They generated huge markets, created jobs, spread industrialization, and stimulated mining and agriculture in the West, because now we can ship those products all over the entire country. It is a huge economic boom. They indeed made us be one of the greatest nations on earth by the early 20th century. So it is true, the captains of industry made us a very rich and powerful and strong nation, but it was definitely at the expense of the poor and the laborers and immigrants. Okay, this is only the last slide I got to today. The time zones. Railroads led to the creation of 4 national time zones instead of each city with its own time zone. By the way, this starts in Greenwich, England, and there happen to be 24 time zones in the entire world. We have 4 of them. So Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. My family makes fun of me because I never know. Everybody I know lives here, and I never know what time it is for them. I don't know whether if it's 7 o'clock for me. I don't know if it's 8 or 6 for them. I don't know why I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. Okay, anyway, so I do like Central Time because all of the cool shows come on at 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. But anyway, we have time zones, and now we can have all the trains be running on the same type of time zone. Everybody knows what time it will be when the trains will get to them. See ya.